All right. Hello, hello. This is Mr. Huff. Hope you're doing well. We're going to be talking about Unit 6, Lesson 2. So let's get started. Okay, so imagine it's Friday night. You're making plans with friends. You need to decide where you're going to eat, what movie you're going to see, that sort of thing. And there might be multiple opinions expressed, right? One person might want to get Chinese food, another person wants to go get burgers, whatever. But in order for the night to go well, you got to make some sort of compromise. Maybe say, okay, we'll go to the Chinese restaurant, but I want to go to the comedy uh, movie, and so you kind of work it out. Well, imagine that you're not in a room with a few friends, but instead you're in a group with 50 people, and instead of deciding about dinner and a movie, you must make decisions about the design of a new system of government for your country. You're among men from all regions of the country with different experiences and beliefs about the government. Delegates discussed many items, but had some key points of disagreement. They debated issues like representation, executive term limits, slavery, the inclusion of a Bill of Rights, and all of these things kind of had to be worked out through compromise. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about what came out of that compromise, which is the Constitution. And we're talking about how that Constitution is structured, and we're talking about kind of how it's organized. All right, so let's get started. The structure of the Constitution emphasizes key information about the document. The Preamble introduces the Constitution. Each article or part of the Constitution contains specific details about the function and structure of the government. The first three articles lay out the roles and responsibilities of the three branches of government, establish the principles of separation of powers, and introduce the principle of checks and balances. The Constitution also establishes the concepts of federalism and republicanism. The U.S. government is rooted in the concept of republicanism because the Constitution requires that representatives and leaders be elected. This is similar to the concept of popular sovereignty. We've talked about republicanism before. We've also talked about federalism before. So that's another important key element of the Constitution. Federalism divides power and responsibility between a national or federal government and state governments. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. It puts forth many of the individual freedoms that the colonists had fought for in the American Revolution. And then finally, the remaining 17 amendments are a kind of a timeline of American history reflecting political and social change. All right. So we're going to go through that here, and we're going to talk about, just briefly about the different sections of the Constitution. Okay, so we're going to start here with the preamble, and this on this slide, it gives you an assignment to kind of walk through the preamble. I'll let you do that on your own, but I do want to flip over here. I'm just using this link that's right here, and I'm going to come here to the Constitution of the United States, and we're going to start with the preamble. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And, the first time you read that, the first time you hear that, you might say, I don't really understand what that's saying. And that's, there are a lot of reasons for that. Well, one, it was written a long time ago, and language has changed a little bit. Two, it's actually a really, really long sentence, which makes it harder to kind of follow and understand. But basically what this sentence is, which is the first sentence of the Constitution, is it explains why the Constitution was written, okay? And by whom? Well, it was written by the people of the United States. It says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Meaning that the reason that we're writing this Constitution is to form a more perfect union. The reason we're writing this Constitution is to establish justice, is to ensure domestic tranquility, is to provide for the common defense, is to promote the general welfare, and is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and those that come after us, our posterity. Okay, so that's essentially what the preamble does. It explains why the Constitution was written and what the framers were trying to accomplish. Okay. Articles 1, 2, and 3, we've actually already talked about these in class because Article 1 is all about the legislative branch. So remember that unit where we talked about, the Senate and the House and how all of that works? Well, that was all straight from Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 2 of the Constitution is all about the executive branch, or the president and the vice president, all that sort of thing. That's all Article 2. You might want to guess. Article 3 is all about the judicial branch, all about the court system. Okay, then we kind of get into stuff we haven't talked about yet. So Article 4 is something called the Full Faith and Credit Clause, the Full Faith and Credit Clause. And essentially what that means is that each state has to recognize the sovereignty of the other states. So if I get a driver's license in South Carolina and then I'm driving in Georgia, then that license from South Carolina gives me the right to drive in Georgia, even though it's issued by South Carolina. Georgia acknowledges that. It's part of the Full Faith and Credit Clause. Article 5 deals with the amendment process. How is it that the Constitution can be amended? We've talked a little bit about this, and we'll talk more about this later. Okay. Article 6 outlines something called the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause essentially says that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, meaning that it is the most important document. Nothing can supersede the Constitution. It is the final word on what is legal and what is not. And then Article 7 is kind of almost like a housekeeping measure, meaning it's designed to explain how the Constitution itself is going to be ratified. So it kind of outlines the procedures for ratification, and it's actually the part where there are signatures. Okay, so there's your 7 articles of the Constitution. And then we get into the amendments. The first 10 amendments, we've talked about this before, are the Bill of Rights. Now, later on in this class, we'll talk about these in more detail, so I'm not going to get into that right now. But the first 10 are the Bill of Rights, and then the last 17 are all the things that have come about after the Bill of Rights. Okay? So that's kind of just a really brief outline of the Constitution. Okay? Oh, here we go. Here's just like we talked about. Article 1 outlines the legislative function of the United States. This includes a bicameral system, 2-house legislature. We've talked about that. Debate over the structure of the legislature and the representation in the legislature resulted in this system. 2 of the many compromises that the legislature made were the Great Compromise and the 3/5 Compromise. And we've talked a little bit about this, but the Great Compromise created the bicameral system. Remember that Virginia wanted a legislature based solely on population, and New Jersey wanted one based solely on equal representation, and they compromised into a bicameral or 2-house legislature. There's also the 3/5 Compromise, which deals with how slaves would be counted for population. And also Article 1 includes the enumerated powers, which are the powers specifically delegated to Congress or the federal legislature. Article 2 outlines the executive branch. Article 3 outlines the judicial branch. And again, remember that when you're going through this, you do need to go and read the corresponding sections in your textbook in order to get a little more detail. Okay. The first 3 articles of the Constitution detail the structure and function of the 3 branches of government. The remaining articles provide logistical details, such as procedures for amending and ratifying the Constitution, establishing the balance of power between the federal and the state governments. And again, we talked about this earlier. So Article 4 is that Full Faith and Credit Clause. Article 5, procedures for amending the Constitution. Article 6 is the Supremacy Clause, and Article 7 are the ratification requirements. Okay, so there are 27 amendments to the Constitution. The first 10 of these are known as the Bill of Rights. Okay, and you're going to talk about these later in the course. And then you can read through this on your own, but essentially it gives you a little bit of an assignment here. So go through and kind of walk through this. I'll let you do that on your own. Now, after the Constitution was written, it didn't automatically become law. It actually had to be ratified or approved by all of the states. And in order to encourage people to support the ratification of the Constitution, a group of men led by Alexander Hamilton, it was Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, wrote a collection of essays. These were called the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers were a collection of 85 essays written between 1787 and 1788 by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. Hamilton represented New York at the Constitutional Convention and was concerned about the opposition to the Constitution in his state. Hamilton enlisted fellow delegate James Madison of Virginia and a political ally from New York, John Jay, to assist in writing essays to the citizens of New York to persuade them of the benefits of the Constitution. These papers have provided legal scholars a more in-depth meaning of the provisions of the Constitution. Of the 85 essays, Jay wrote 5, Madison wrote 29, and Hamilton wrote 51. New York ultimately ratified the Constitution in 1788. Okay? All 3 of the authors of the Federalist Papers continued to be public servants. Jay became the very first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Alexander Hamilton served as first Treasury Secretary, and James Madison went on to become the 4th President of the United States. And you can watch the video to learn more about the Federalist Papers. Super important. Okay, so here is an activity, and we're not going to go through this here, but I encourage you to go through this on your own and really make sure you understand kind of the connection between the Federalist Papers and the Constitution. And this activity does a great job of kind of walking you through that. And then here, again, is an activity. I'm not going to walk through this necessarily, but essentially asks you to think about the structure and function of a branch of government. So I'll let you do that on your own, and then we end with the quick check. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Take care.